for joining us today. Today, we're joined with three fabulous artists who are part of a larger group show at Goucher College called From Soil to Skim, which is on view at the Silber Art Gallery in Baltimore, Maryland, from February 13th to March 28th. Thank you three for joining me today. Melissa, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm Melissa Penley Cormier. Currently, I'm working at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC. I'm the manager of research graphics, which is actually located in the Sciences and Mathematics College. And so I run an imaging facility where I print posters, do graphic design work, and photography for the sciences, mostly, but can do anybody on campus. So yeah, I also have an MFA from UMBC as well in imaging and research, imaging. So, and I've been working kind of in Maryland for the past 10 years, mostly in photography, some installation work.
Fantastic, thank you. And Raymond, you're next.
Yes, hello, my name is Raymond Thompson Jr. I am an artist, journalist, and an educator. I'm currently based in Austin, Texas, where I teach at the University of Texas at Austin in the School of Journalism and Media. My practice is primarily photography. In the past 5-6 years, it's sort of focused on either of or very near like archives and using archives in my practice. I tend to, my big general like elevated pitch is I like to concentrate on searching for the African-American body in the American landscape. This is the big jam. So all the work I do touches on that in some kind of way. And the work that's in the show is called Appalachian Ghosts. And we'll talk more, I guess, about that as we move through. So going on the whole, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. All right, and Lynn.
Yes, hello. I'm Lynn Cazabon, and I'm an artist in Baltimore. I teach. I'm a professor at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, where Melissa also works. I've been there for decades. And my work, I say kind of, most of my projects are kind of situated at the intersection between environmental and social issues. And my background is actually in photography, but my work also spans video as well as and participatory strategies. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you three for joining me today. I'm super excited to hear more about each of your work and your practices. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with the first question. Each of you speaks to a different way of seeing, and all three of you are lens-based artists: film, photography, media. And whether it's looking closely and joyfully reclaiming historical narratives or examining environmental systems, how does photography and lens-based practices help you practice this way of seeing, and how do you hope it influences how viewers see the world?
I can jump in. I use photography a lot as record keeping. Just kind of what we pay attention to, what we're recording is kind of what we're also caring about. So for me, it's also a little bit like practicing empathy. Photography is also very fraught. I mean, it can also be very violent and be weaponized. So I am cognizant of that as well, but I'm trying to kind of not use it in that way as often, and kind of use it as more of a note-keeping task for me, and to also talk to other people. Once people see the images, I tend to have a lot more conversations outside of the work, not while I'm making it, but like once it's being shown or seen. So
I think for me, I tend to use photography as a starting point to try to point at what is not shown a lot. I mean, a lot of things have been photographed, but oftentimes, the reason why they are photographed for all kinds of reasons are really can be important to people, but there's always something on the edge that gets left out. And a lot of my practice, or what I've been interested in, is like using photography to get me to a point, but then to use it as a jump off point to explore things left out or things not shown. So for me, I'm interested in what photography on the very edges of it, where it starts to fall apart, in the dark spaces, and the spaces where the medium begins to fail is when I think I tend to focus my practice.
Yeah, and I mentioned that my background is photography, and actually I feel that I always approach my video work as a photographer. I don't tend to move the camera around a lot. The camera is very stationary, very, very long extended shots observing, and you can see that in Ecobiome, the name of the piece that's in the show. Also, the other thing in this piece that I think is particularly photographic is I've divided the frames of the videos into 4 panels. And so you're actually seeing, I'm openly highlighting like the cropped nature of the images. And you're aware that there's things that are moving in and out of the frame, and there's a world outside that frame that you're not seeing. So that I think carries over from my work in photography as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And going off of that fact, then, how do the three of you balance kind of the documentary aspects of photography with artistic interpretation, especially when dealing with historical narratives or scientific context?
So I tend to use a lot of like scientific methods for imaging in my work, but they're decidedly not scientific. There's a lot of liberties taken with just like the scale and the size. Blowing up the nests kind of brings them more of a human aspect and size, but there's not really like a scale next to it that you would normally see in like specimen photography, but they're sort of seen and lit that way as if they're a specimen. So there's kind of a little bit of fibbing that this is fact. A lot of the dust and stuff I kind of leave in because I like it and I want it to be there as evidence that like these are like weird little gross objects, where in some science photography you would see people kind of clean that up or try to get as clean of an image as possible of the nest. So yeah, I like to play around a little bit with the materials that way too. Also, in the framing of the images, the prints themselves collect dust too, like just photographs do over time. So that sort of adds to like each one is going to be slightly different, and that adds to the collection, I feel like, as well. But yeah.
I think I mean, my background, besides, I mean, I did go to get an MFA. Before that, I spent probably 7 years as a photojournalist. So I think that approach, that photojournalism documentary approach to the world is very much ingrained in me. I'm sort of mixing a bit more of the artistic practice from my MFA that I did. But because of that, I still like to use the language of documentary in my work quite a bit. But just, adding my own little, especially in the work in Appalachian Ghosts, like I'm still like, I use it 2 ways. One, I'm like using documentary imagery to inspire the making of these images. So I'm like looking for, clothing, instruments people were wearing within these archival photographs I was using, and then using that to inspire the making of a new set of portraits. So I think it's very much in my practice just specifically in this project, but also a big part of my practice is field based. I like to go to places to make work. Even though Appalachian Ghost was a mixture, like, some of it was studio based, some of it was in the landscape, and I kind of went back and forth between those spaces. But that documentary photojournalistic practice is a big part in the way I engage in photography and how I engage with land.
Yeah, I would say that I use a documentary approach in Ecobiome, but they're also, I would say, they're they're very fictional too. They're visual stories, so there's no narration. I don't explain anything. I'm just really like a bystander and a fly on the wall in a way. And I want the viewer to see things as I did. I was also the entire time there, this work came out of a residency that I did at the Institute for Marine and Environmental Technology in Baltimore. I was just always struck by the weirdness of the place, this place where I was, recording, and just kept thinking how weird it is. Look at our relationship to the natural world. Like how distant we are from it in this internal space of land-based aquaculture, and the technology, bridges the gap between us and the natural environment, or tries to anyway. Of course, I took a lot of liberties as well. I shot a lot of footage, but I did flip frames 180 degrees, or cropped things, so there was a lot of liberties in terms of the way this footage is presented in the 3 videos.
Excellent. All right, and just a reminder to our watchers, feel free to ask questions in the comment on whatever platform you're watching, and we will have a Q&A section later. All right. Okay. Also, a reminder, you 3, you can also, if you have questions for each other, feel free to ask as well. It's more of a conversation. All right, Melissa, we're going to start some specific questions for you. Now, in your artistic statement, you mentioned that you love creating both delightful and awful things, sometimes simultaneously. How do you navigate that tension, and how kind of do you explore those emotional contrasts?
So I feel like photography is itself very joyful, but also very disgusting, or very this very dualistic. You can use photography to show any number of things, or create joy, or you could see yourself in a photo and feel kind of grossed out, or kind of queasy about like how you look. So you can elicit a lot of different reactions with it just of itself. This group of nests that are currently up in the gallery too, just the size is pretty monumentous. So people tend to have a reaction to it because it's something that they've seen before, either if you're in North America, as a kid or something, you've been told they might be dangerous. You usually kind of stumble on them. They blend in pretty well with their surrounding. Wasps tend to kind of make their nests under, little wooden structures, kind of out of the same materials that they're hiding in. But by pulling them into the scanner, and then putting a dark field behind them, they sort of become this other thing in and of itself. And they're beautiful. It's just exciting to see what these tiny little creatures created, seemingly for no one else but themselves to see and look at, and to house their young. So it's a protective space too, which it's very carefully crafted to care for future generations. But they're also made for one season, and then they just are discarded. They don't reuse these ever again. They'll sometimes build beside them, so you'll see colonies of them. But they're kind of just a one season thing. And then you usually get 1 or 2 wasps that survive the winter, and then they'll start their own new colony in the next spring. And somehow they know how to build this whole structure again, and they start out by themselves and then keep adding as well. And so it's, I don't know, kind of marvelous, but also I was terrified of these as a kid. I don't know, I grew up with, a lot of structures in the the little tiny farmette that I grew up in, where these were kind of hiding out anywhere, and you could just suddenly get stung by a bunch of wasps if you messed with them, or didn't know they were there. But by collecting these and kind of seeing the differences in all the structures, it really helps me appreciate and find more joy in how beautiful they really are. I think it helps the audiences too. At least I hear that a lot. They also tell me horrible stories of getting stung, or how terrified, or there's a phobia of this kind of hole structure. that there's, I don't know, a big long word for that. So some people will walk in and immediately just sort of like, why would you do this? And why would you print these this big? Which it always kind of, I don't know, intrigues me, like what the reactions to these are. So yeah, anyway, I hope that's
perfect. Thank you. Yeah, no, it was fascinating. I was really captivated when preparing for the show and going onto your website. I was like, this is very interesting. Let me learn more.
And I do have kind of a companion piece with flowers that actually started after this section. And it started during the pandemic, and they're much more like traditionally beautiful, but more, I mean, they're actually based on something that's fairly sad, is I couldn't see a lot of my loved ones. And so I was sort of remembering them and like trying to connect with them over certain flowers that they like really had a connection to or had given me in my garden. And that to me it's funny. That one's actually more like mournful than the nests are terrifying. So it's, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing to play around with. Like, but.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Now I have a question for Raymond. So in your statement for Appalachian Ghost, you used primary source materials to kind of visually reconstruct the history that's largely been erased from memory, both intentionally and unintentionally. How do you approach the responsibility of kind of reimagining these historical events while preserving kind of historical integrity?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, working, like, I'm not from Appalachia per se. I mean, I was born in Baltimore, grew up in outside Washington, D.C. area. And, so going into Appalachia at first, I was kind of feeling like an imposter in that space, like I'm coming here to tell the story of this place. And should I be doing that or not came across my mind a lot. But then also in being in that location and realizing that no one else was doing it, felt that, I needed to, to sort of add my, I like to use the metaphor like brick, like my one story to this bigger story of what happened in this space. Like I didn't believe anything that I was doing was going to be, was that it's not the definitive story. It's just a version of a look of one visit, one person's opinion about these spaces. So for me, how I, after I did that, one of the first things I did was to dive into the archive to look at how the story of the Hawks Tunnel disaster was even shown within the media, within newspapers, within the memory of the space. And what I noticed that there was some memory, but a lot of that memory was only told from one point of view and leaving out the majority of the people who were involved with the Hawks Tunnel, which was African-American regional workers. So from that, realizing, here's the whole entire archive, that even in the archive itself, it's kind of biased. There aren't a lot of pictures of Black folks in the archive. And even when I'd watch documentary films, I'd find there's no one from the Black communities who are in that space or someone else who's able to even talk about it. So for me, it became a thing like, how do I create work that brings these people back into the archival conversation? Like the work is never really meant to sit by itself. I mean, that's why, I kind of work in the form of the book for that reason. And the book itself combines these things with archival materials. So oftentimes, I'll be inspired by a photograph, make my image of a photograph, and then I will like in the book, I would include the source material and what I did, because I wanted that stuff to be in conversation with each other. So I think I'm taking this sort of I am both working with archival materials, but I always like to show that reference very close to each other in the work. So even for the from the 12 men, these 48 by 72 inch photographs that I made all come from one archival photograph, and giving it this treatment again was trying to I think there's a question later that I will get more into these, but yeah. So I think I was really wanted to both use archival materials, show that source material, but then sort of break it a little bit and try to show it in a different light.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, no, I am definitely a big fan of the book you published, and I'll have a question later about the book format. We'll get to that though. All right, Lynn. I have a question, but also since you have video work, I would love a chance to kind of show an excerpt of your video. So, do you want to do video first and then question, or question the video?
We can show a clip of the video. Sure. Yeah.
Perfect. So that's the first clip. We'll have another clip here in a few minutes. A lot of what EcoBite does is often highlights kind of invisible labor behind scientific research. How did you approach the challenge of making this labor visible, and how do you hope it changes kind of a viewer's perception of environmental sustainability?
Yeah, I think what I was struck by spending time at IMET was that there's a kind of divide between the conceptual labor of science and the physical labor. And I was, really not always understanding what the science was, or, asking lots of questions. And it's sometimes that conceptual labor is invisible, or sitting at people writing, etc. And so I was just really struck by the visible aspect of the physical labor, and actually I came to understand that there's a lot of parallels between the work of experimental experiments that scientists do and the work of artists. There's a lot of making do with stuff and putting stuff together and sticking stuff together, and a lot of maintenance involved. And certainly the space that I was working in it's called the Aquaculture Research Center, which is it occupies an entire floor of a building that's in the Inner Harbor next to the National Aquarium, full of PVC pipes and big tanks, and it's all interconnected. It's flowing water. They have to be at the right temperature. They have to be the right salinity for the different species of fish. So there's just so much maintenance involved in that. And so, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think I arrived at kind of just that visible aspect of all that labor by the scientists, by the staff that's involved, that you don't see when you think about scientific research. And this research in particular is centered on creating a sustainable aquaculture, land-based aquaculture system. So this is different than the pens of fish that are in bodies of water. These are tanks that hold the fish. Yeah, did I answer your question? Okay.
Did. Okay.
If you,
So
if you want to show the other clip to show the mechanical stuff, you can. But,
that is exactly what I was about to do.
okay. Sorry. Yeah, the quality was kind of wonky and the sound was choppy, so I just felt like it's better to just stop it. I can't hear you, Liz.
Sorry, that makes sense. All right. So you have this as a 3-part video series, correct?
It's a triptych. It's 3 videos. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And can you give a brief introduction to each of the 3 sections?
Sure. Maybe you want to show the slideshow, or I wasn't sure if I was doing that separately or okay. And I have this whole other thing that is probably irrelevant, but yeah. So there's 3 different parts. The title of the project is Ecobiome. Each one has a subtitle. This one is called Life Death, and this covers the work of scientist Keiko Saito, is her name, and she was working at the time with European sea bass. So I followed her from the time of when they were just little baby fish to the time that they harvest them. What you saw was towards the end of the video where the fish are killed with it's like what you call it? I'm blanking. The ice. Yeah, you know what I mean. They put dry ice rather in the tank, and it was very dramatic, and it's this cloud, and then the fish slowly die. The second, maybe you can go ahead. So there's this whole set of slides of Diego Rivera, which won't make any sense, but because I thought I was going to talk about that.
So you'd have to hit next.
Oh, I have the slide. Right. Okay. Sorry. Okay, got it. So I'll scroll through those. Okay, and then the second one is maintenance, and we saw the clip of that one. And this is one of the staff people who is involved in the incredible plumbing. And really, the reason I was going to show you Diego Rivera is it really inspired the form of this project, the Diego Rivera murals from the Detroit industry murals. I grew up in Detroit, and that work is really pivotal for me artistically, and that actually influenced in the way this whole project was realized compositionally. And his body kind of merges with the machinery and the technology and comes in and out of the frame throughout the video. The third one, that's actually Life and Death. These are some of the stills from that one. And the final one took place in a different space within IMET. It's a lab of this Dr. Kevin Sowers. He works with microorganisms, and in his lab is full of gigantic fermenters that these are anaerobic microorganisms, so they can't be exposed to oxygen, and they're in these big fermenters, and he cooks them up. That's how I saw it. He's kind of cooking them up to do various things. One thing they do is to transform the fish waste into methane gas. And then also he's worked with these different microorganisms to clear up PCBs from bodies of water. So they're using the microorganisms to do certain tasks because they feed on different things. Yeah, so it's a 3-part. Actually, when I was doing this project, I shot so much footage. I thought I was going to have 9 videos, and then I quickly realized that's ridiculous. I'm going to, so it's centered on these three stories.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question I have is kind of something for everyone, which is kind of how does the materiality of your subjects for each of you influence the conceptual depth of your work?
I can start again. So just the gathering of the nests is kind of a whole process too. Like people giving me things, so that sort of keeps the whole project kind of going. Is people find stuff, realize like, oh yeah, I remember Melissa really likes wasp nests, and they'll just show up with like a box of them, and then I feel like I need to like image each one of them. So that's sort of that's what's been influencing the scale of the collection. I feel like also just having that many of them really, I don't know, lends to the idea of each one is individual, and there's such a unique craft to each individual nest, even though some of them are the same species, or in the same area, but like the materials themselves that they're gathering over time are very different. I don't know, like I'm not an entomologist, so like I'm sure, please, yeah, please go find a scientist that is really into wasps because they will talk your ear off about this. I'm more of someone that is just really into their architecture. But they, I think, have like different plant materials or things that they like to collect. But sometimes if that's not available, they'll just sort of use whatever they can, kind of like the scientists or the artists, where they're just making do. The American Museum of Natural History has one of the largest collections of wasp nests anywhere, and they have a lot that are made out of like strange human materials, like napkins or tablecloths or other like the clothing stuff that they find in the garbage because there's nothing else around, and so they have these bands of color kind of inside the paper that they're making. And then it was interesting to me too that like we as humans were making paper way before we started making it out of paper pulp. And there was a French scientist who kind of saw some of the nests coming back from North America and was like, well, why can't we do this? Like if wasps are making things out of paper pulp, then why can't we make paper? And they last for so long, like if they're not left out in the elements. It's kind of amazing to me that they last way longer if we bring them inside and like kind of, I don't know, hold on to them than if they're outside. They last about a season. And then like birds will also use them to make their nests and some other things. Like they'll pull things. Mice will sometimes chew them up and like eat stuff out of them. So yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a neat thing to think about how their material that they use to build their own nests also have a big influence on the arts, because most of my stuff is printed onto paper that's made out of paper pulp. So I mean, or most of my notes are all written on that too. So yeah.
I think, yeah, for me, the material, I mean, it's all the work is in some way influenced by something. Like, specifically the images that are in the show from this series of their project I call The Dust. I mean, literally, I saw a photograph, an archival image of a man walking out of a tunnel portal being like surrounded by this white dust. And it was like that just that inspired this series of like, what would that look like if I was in that tunnel? I wanted to make pictures that if I was standing next to someone and the dust was like surrounding us, what might that look like? So for me, like that one picture inspired all of like this entire series within the project that's on the walls. But then again, there's another part of the project called tunnelitis. Not tunnelitis, I'm sorry. Erased, which is essentially is a it's basically archival photographs that have then ripped text from letters describing what it was like to be in the tunnel and sort of combined them on top of each other. the very nature of some of the photographs, or the nature of the photographic printing process, specifically the source material for this image. These figures look like they've been removed from the image in some chemical way. And so there's something about the idea of these people being buried within an archival photograph, and then me trying to take texts that sort of describe what it was like to do this work and put them into this, into this triptych, erased. So, I mean, that's material. I had to go to the archive and find that letter, the actual physical letter, get it scanned, and then, create the image within a computer. And, in 12 Men, again, same thing, looking at archival photograph, that material, what that is a picture as an object in the world, how it existed. I mean, the image I was working from was a duplication of the original photograph itself. So I got a duplication, and then I got a digital copy of that duplication at 30 megabyte TIFF file, which has limits digitally. And then I kind of, make another copy of it again, very much bigger than you're supposed to with a digital file. Like the images I made there was not enough information in the file to make these images. Because of that, I would get artifacts and all kinds of I don't know, when these things are in front of you, like if you're within 2 feet, you can't see anything, but just like gray noise, basically. But as you walk away from it, there's probably a word for it, but your mind works it out, and you begin to see these figures emerge from this dust, this digital noise that's on top of the surface of the picture. So materiality plays a big part of the work. And I think I usually try to have something about the story, the materials, or something that go together within the projects that I do.
Okay, I'll try to answer. I think one thing is, and I've already mentioned this, is that the showing the physical labor involved in scientific research as opposed to the conceptual labor, which is invisible. So does kind of connect with the material realm. Also, the stuff. I mean, the way that I structured the videos in terms of the panels flattens out the space, and also just, to me, was a better representation of the kind of claustrophobic nature of the space, the aquaculture research center, and all the stuff, all the PVC pipes, tanks, etc. It's incredibly, every inch of space is full. There's no, wide open spaces, no breathing room at all. So I think that is also in the realm of materiality. I also feel like, for me, that in ecobiont, time is a material. So I mentioned I shot a lot of footage, and in a way, of course, their work extends far beyond the span of time of these videos. And by having the 4 panels that show different moments in time, that I could show a lot more information in them, and different moments, they don't line up, chronologically. But that I feel like that time and space become a material that I play with in these in this work.
Excellent. Okay, so I think we have time for one more question before we open up to some Q&A. And I actually have a question for all of you about, you guys are all exhibiting together, and there is a larger group of artists. But my question for you 3 is, there is a lot of photography in the show. There's cyanotypes and soilgrams that some other artists who aren't in this artist talk, but you 3 are mostly the lens, not straight photography, but definitely more lens-based photography in the show. How do you guys react to each other's work, especially after learning about kind of each of your projects today?
So I've always been a big fan of Lynn's work. Coming to UMBC, it was one of the faculty members that I sought out when I applied to the program because, just amazing, very in-depth. I've been amazed at how much there are connections between my work and all the other artists that are in the show too. Like I don't know, it's crazy to see like the ceramic pieces by artist. I just had her name in front of me. They're the large ones, the core samples.
Oh.
Yes. Will you say her name again? I'm sorry. Oh, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
Arco's work.
Yes, yeah. Just how the nests are made are nearly like there's so many similarities between like how she crafted those works versus like how, I don't know, what I'm trying to memorialize, I guess, in the photographs that I'm looking at. I also do want to say these are all made on a flatbed scanner. They're not actually made with a regular camera, so it's like a slightly different look to it. And yeah, it's, I don't know, but a little bit technically different. But it is fun to see like how other mostly photographers approach the work of just the environment too, because photography isn't really super sustainable. I mean, it's like digital work seems a little bit more sustainable, but when you look at the amount of power and things that go into just housing archives that are digital, especially with AI getting, I don't know, anyway. So it's nice to see like how other people are kind of working in that same medium. Also, Raymond, I'm from Appalachia, and I don't feel like I can tell stories there. I always feel like a weird outsider because I haven't lived there my whole adult life. So the wasp nests to me are a little bit of like being able to tell parts of my childhood without like saying that I'm, speaking for everybody in that region, because it's such a weird, like huge region of different cultures as well and different people. Yeah, but.
Unfortunately, I've not had a chance to see the collection of the work together, but just the brief glimpses I'm getting right here. I'm definitely like appreciating the video's work was very much like, at first I was like looking at the steam coming off of the pool of water, what was happening. It was very intriguing, but also I was kind of grossed out at the same time and confused, but I loved it. A lot of feelings I was having by looking at it. And then I remembered the word aquatecture. It's like, oh, are they harvesting fish? This is what that looks like. Oh my God. It's like, so there are a lot of things going on in my head when I saw that. And of course, that aesthetically, I really appreciate the wasp nest. I mean, I feel like that's an aesthetic that sort of black on, that I've scientific object on black. I've used quite a bit of my own work from the stuff in my tunnelitis shot against black. Even in my most recent work, I was just something shot against black. Turns it into like an object. I've been doing these portraits that use a similar technique. So I wish I could see the show so I can spend more time with it to see the other works and how they work together. But yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just say I was really impressed with the combination of works in the show. It is a really interesting show. It's a very strong exhibition. I hope everybody out there goes and sees it in person. Yes, I'm familiar with Melissa's work as a student at UMBC, and also another artist in the show, Elena DeBold, was one of my students as well. And I'm just really, proud and I feel pleased to be in the show with them, and really, super impressed with the work they created. I think actually it's interesting that Elena's work really resonated for me because she's working with cyanotype, which is a medium that so many people use that I feel in a kind of cliched way with flowers or plants, and she's using medical images from her struggles with chronic illnesses, and it's so profound. And also I love the blue as a reference to blood that is not oxygenated. So I just really love her work. I've already talked about it with other graduate students, and I think Melissa's wasp nests, I actually think in some ways they're not scientific because of the black background, because I always think of scientific photos as being more like on a white background. And the black background makes them very dramatic and theatrical. And lastly, I'm so happy to know Raymond's work now, because now I'm going to be looking more closely at his website and exploring his work because it looks amazing. And so I look forward to learning more about the whole body of your work.
I would also recommend that everybody check out his book, The Appalachian Ghost. Goucher College is definitely going to be getting that into our collection. And Raymond, actually, I don't know if you mentioned this, but he's from Baltimore. So that's also a really excellent connection to kind of our location and our geography and our history.
Yeah, my family, a big part of my family is from Baltimore, or they're from North Carolina to Baltimore. But I was born there, and a lot of family there.
So I'm really looking forward to when that comes in. Now, we do have about 15 minutes left for questions, and there are a few in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and start with one that's aimed towards everybody. So someone on YouTube asks, if you had to explore another medium entirely, what would you choose to further explore the subjects that interest you?
My BFA is actually in oil painting. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. But so I do draw a lot. I do still paint a little bit. I actually am really terrible at painting wasp nests. Something about the structure of them, they look really strange. I have 3D scanned them and was looking at like 3D printing them, but also depending on the scanner, a lot of times the computer can't see like the structure either because they're so thin. So that's been kind of fun to see like the artifacts that the print, like the 3D printers, which is the same way that the wasps are making things, are really bad at mimicking them. So yeah, that's my.
I think the most natural one for me is video. There's video is part of my professional, like commercial world practice, and I'm starting to dip my toes in it as an artist as well. I think that's like the most natural progression for me to make is the sound, performance, and motion. And my dreams would be a sculptor if I didn't have to like go back and learn some new skills. But I mean, I took a few sculpture classes as an MFA student and I loved it. So it's like I would be doing much more of that. But my natural and like what I do is more motion. Well, lens based is more what I do. That's my practice.
Yeah, I think I actually also kind of wish I could learn glass blowing and ceramics. Like I actually really crave to work 3D. I don't have the skills, and I've thought very much about taking some classes, etc., to try to build that skill out. But working, more sculpturally and to kind of augment the installations I create with photographs and video would be what I would say.
Fantastic. All right, Raymond, we have a question specifically for you. Do you develop the conceptual framework and then do the research to seek archival images, or do you come across the archive images and then generate conceptual framework inspired from the images, or is it both?
Boom. I think it's kind of a combination of both. Because I've had projects before and where I start off with some sort of conceptual framework. The very first project I did before going to grad school, it was based off of a book that I read. And then I tried to realize that in photographs, which is actually really difficult to do at times. But I started in that place. Appalachian Ghost came from the experience of both. I read about it, a journalism piece about it, and then I went to that space and was inspired by actually visiting it. And the thoughts and questions I had in my head of trying to understand it. So, and that started more of that experience. And then when I found the picture, like, oh, this picture is the way in to it, if that makes sense. But it is like the conceptual frameworks are really, really important for my understanding of like how I want to approach the visual. I mean, it's actually, I mean, sometimes like it causes me lots of like, oh my God, what is photography? What does it mean? And just all the problems I have with it. Like the big thing for me is like, even in my work, I started off very, very, very figure-based. And now I'm like all the way over here in this abstract stuff, right? And I'm like, the figure has left my work over the past 5 to 8 years. And I don't know if it's not gone forever, but it's definitely I am very like hesitant to use bodies in my work now. Not to say that I won't ever do it, but it's something that I'm sort of working through. It's because of some of the theory that I've been reading and the issues with photography in that way. But so I say both to answer to your question.
Excellent. And then Kay also has a question for Lynn. Since it's a triptych video work, has this project been displayed in different ways than what's on view at the gallery? He says it would be a great video installation.
I agree, Kay. Thank you. That's actually what I would like to do. This is actually the first time I've shown all 3 of the videos in one exhibition. So to be honest, that's what my desire is, to have, you know, a 3-room or a multi-screened installation of this project, because they all each have asynchronous sound, but they do have sound. There is this, you know, kind of, they have to be separated in some way because of the audio. But yeah, great idea. If you have any spaces that would like to host me, please let me know.
Fantastic. And do we have any final thoughts from any of you?
I just want to
thank you, Liz. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, jinx. No, I mean, it's a beautifully curated show. So like I was floored walking in and seeing, like, it's, yeah. And I've seen other things in that space that have been beautiful, but yeah, it's a gorgeous show. So thanks for the invite.
You're welcome. It's definitely a very vertical show. There was a lot of a lift going up and down installing it, but I think it turns out great. And also for our viewers, keep an eye out. We will have a digital catalog coming out soon for you to read more about each of these artists and some essays. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Much.